There we go. Thank you, Katie.
Okay, thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you all for coming out here today to talk about the topic, the most current topic, the ever-changing topic on a daily basis. I think the emergency summit is on as we speak in Brussels at the minute, so all could be changed in an hour or two depending on how everyone votes. So I suppose really with Brexit, everyone knows it's had major political, economic, financial impact worldwide, but has actually had a huge linguistic impact as well. And oftentimes when you look at the language, it reflects people's attitudes, how people are talking about Brexit, what people think about Brexit. And I suppose with the term itself, not focusing particularly on the Irish language, but even Brexit itself is a new word in language. So for linguists, it's interesting to see how new words are adopted, how new words are created, when there is a gap in a language, when we need to talk and discuss and communicate something, how we do that. And Brexit is a unique example because of the huge worldwide impact that the actual phenomenon or the concept itself has. So not only has it been interesting from the English language, but also it's been unique from an Irish language perspective, and I'll be discussing some of that in a minute. So just, I think it might be help people to see this little map and explain why I'm here and where I've come from and my connection to Montana. So I'm from Cork, born and raised in the south of Ireland, and about 10, 11 years ago I was lucky enough, as part of my undergrad in UCC, I was studying law and the Irish language, to undertake an internship with Justice Malloy, Judge Lynch and Judge McLean in Missoula, Montana, and also help Tréadh O'Riordan and assist him in teaching the language in the University of Montana. So I had a great time in Missoula, loved Montana, and have been meaning to come back ever since, but it's taken me the best part of 10 years to get back here, but thankfully I am. So since then I've kind of been doing bits and pieces, lots of other working, travelling here, there and everywhere, but I suppose for the majority of 5-6 years I've spent in DCU studying. So I went on and decided to do a PhD in Irish language and the linguistic, I suppose, focusing on how language is used, terms, idioms, phrases, Irish language and literature. And we did a postdoc afterwards, so I spent a good few years in Dublin, and then last September I moved to Sligo. So I'm now lecturing in St Angela's College in Sligo, which is a college of the National University of Ireland in Galway. And I've drawn this picture of Ireland because I'll be referring to the country and to the north and the border a lot. Obviously Brexit has a unique impact on Ireland because of our land border, because the 6 counties in the north are part of the United Kingdom and not part of the Republic. So the Irish language and how we talk about Brexit and how the new term has entered is really reflective of our unique geographical situation, our shared history, and all that's involved with it. And I suppose for me, moving to Sligo, it's the closest I've ever lived to the border, and I really do see when there is no border how people live in the north, work in the south, how people travel over and back every single day. And if a border was in existence again, it would cause huge difficulties, trouble, and unforeseen difficulties, I suppose, for a lot of people. So, for anyone who hasn't been to Ireland, Sligo is also known as Yeats' country. It inspired a lot of W.E.B. Yeats's poetry, and it is really a beautiful county, as I'm learning. And I'm very lucky this year, my office is overlooking Lough Gill, and on Lough Gill, this lake, there is an island called Innisfree, which was the inspiration for Yeats' famous poem, The Lake Isle of Innisfree. So the view from my office isn't that bad at all. I'm very, very lucky to be looking out on Innisfree and Lough Gill every day. You kind of take it for granted when you're there every day. So it is a lovely place to work. So today, back to the main topic, I'll briefly kind of give an introduction and background to Brexit and the Irish language, Anything that will be in Irish will be translated, so there's no need to worry about that. The research I did and some of the results, and they were the kind of interesting kind of sociolinguistic insight into Brexit and the Irish language. So just a brief overview. In the last census in 2016, the total number of persons who could speak Irish on the census was about 1.7 million, which was in around 40% of the population. Now this was a huge wide demographic. People who have a few words, people who are fluent. So it's difficult to really measure the amount of, the level of fluency, I suppose, in this number. In Ireland also, as you can see here on the left, or to your right, there are Gaeltacht regions, so Irish language speaking regions, where traditionally the language was spoken, the main spoken language by a majority of the people in these areas. And as you see, they're mainly on the western seaboard, Donegal, Mayo, Galway, Kerry, and just here where I am from, in Loingsigh in Cork. So that would be the area I would have grown up in. That came to about 90,000, so it really is only about 1-2% of the population. So it's a huge discrepancy here between the amount who have some type of Irish and then the Gaeltacht regions. So people might say, and might presume, or might believe that because the Gaeltacht regions are so limited and so small, that the Irish language isn't a vibrant language. It isn't a language that can deal with new terms or new concepts, but new terms are continually entering the language, and a lot of the time it's dependent on what's going on. So recently there was a lot of talk and reporting about the blood moon, and Galach na Folla. This was a new word that hadn't been really used very much, but also millennial, influencer, and various ways also. The selfie, I suppose, a lot of these new words and new terms, they stem from social media, because before the official word comes out and is produced and published, these concepts are being discussed online portals via social media. So Féin Fic was kind of in use, which is a self-picture, for a lot of the time, but then that changed, and what the official term now is Féinine, so is a small me. So this is a diminutive form. So a small me is the official term for selfie. So it is a vibrant language. It is a popular language, and there is a huge online presence, which is great for the language, and a huge community of great interest worldwide, even here in Butte and Missoula. Also, there are a couple of Irish speakers, more than a couple, which is great to hear. So, back to Brexit. So, just a brief background to the word itself, the English word. So it was initially, the first time it was coined was in 2012. And it's really a blend of Britain or British with exit, capturing the meaning Brexit, or Britain exiting from the European Union, or the various forms. Now this word really, now in 2016 it was added to the Oxford English Dictionary, so the speed and creativity and introduction to the dictionary is phenomenal. Usually it takes 20-30 years for a word to be accepted into the Oxford English Dictionary, but because of the huge economic, social, political impact, it is the word that the dogs in the street know about, talk about, use every single day. You don't need to explain it to everyone. It was voted in 2014 and 2015 the Oxford Word of the Year, and in the space of 4 years it has been added to the dictionary, which is really exceptional, but reflective of what's going on currently with Brexit and everything else it involves. So, and this really, what helps new words enter a language, any language, is the immediate social context. So this played a crucial role in the formation of a new word. So the political and social setting frequently induces the coinage of new words. And with Brexit, it has a worldwide political and social impact. So obviously, as a major event in British and European history, together with all of the controversy surrounding it, as a word or as a term, it's a prime example of a political event which is easily prone to the formation of new coinages. Not only Brexit, and everything else included with the term and the word and all the variant forms and additional words, the kind of lexicon that's developed from it is interesting. So I'll be looking at some of those examples now in a minute. So if you want to look at language, and I'll just kind of briefly, I thought it'd be interesting to look at a couple of American examples, the American English, and then we'll go back to the Irish language. So when I was in DCU, I did a postdoctorate, and it was basically in linguistics, and it was creating corpus. So corpus is a huge collection, a digital collection of texts. So this is the American corpus, and you can analyse how words are used, what context exists for the creation of new words, and the contextual examples, or the company words keep. So this corpus has about 520 million words. And if you search Brexit, you can see here the first time it was ever used, now it's a bit small, was in 2014. And you see all the Huffington Post, Business Insider, it's magazines, newspapers, they're all digitised, put into this huge corpus, and you can search every instance of Brexit. So you can get a list, but you can also see what's first called the company words keep. So this is interesting. So the most frequent words that occur with Brexit, the number one is vote, so the Brexit vote. The number two, which was probably unique to the US, is Trump. I presume if we looked at the British National Corpus, or if there was a corpus of Hiberno-English, Trump probably wouldn't be up there as much, but he probably would he'd feature high up on the list, but obviously this is reflective of American English. Hard Brexit, Britain Brexit, referendum, negotiations, June, so that was when the vote was. So you can really see the company words keep, and you can look then at the examples. So we can see here the Brexit vote, to vote on Brexit. So for linguists and for dictionary makers, corpora are great because they're real life examples. You're not creating texts. It's completely objective. You just search for a word and you get all these results back. And then you can see how words are used if you're learning a language, the grammar, if you're creating a dictionary and you need examples, and you have a huge variety of sources. So also the frequency is interesting to see, because obviously that reflects the language you use and the context it exists in. So I'll be looking at an Irish language corpus and Brexit in a minute, but this kind of was interesting just to see how American English deals with and relates to Brexit. So the Irish language, we've had a unique situation, unique to every other language. Most languages, French, German, they use Brexit. But what has happened in Irish, we've created a new word, brat imacht, which is a blend of Britain and imacht, to leave. And even Brexit as well, both these terms are problematic because it refers, Brexit and brat imacht refers to Britain leaving the European Union. Britain does not include Northern Ireland, but if Brexit happens, Northern Ireland will be leaving the European Union as well. So this, in the Irish language, actually created, there was a debate at the time, is this word appropriate because it does not reflect the actual situation as it's happening, but it was adopted and is in use now. Not only were these two words, these are the two predominant ones, at the beginning we had a few others. So we had Sassenach, which is a blend of Sasna and Demach, so England, go out. We also had Brailu, people were using this word, Britain, to escape, and there were a few other ones as well. But again, this was completely and utterly unique to the Irish language. No other language has felt the need to create a unique word to describe Brexit. So the first recorded use, the first time Brexit ever appeared in an Irish language text was on Twitter. So I got this Professor Kevin Scannell, who is based in the Department of Computer Science in St. Louis University in Missouri, was great and helped me out with searching the entire internet of Irish language texts, and was able to tell me this tweet was the first time Brexit was ever used in an Irish language context. And this was in 2015, and I'll read out the translation. It is a cause for relief for me that the DUP are not kingmakers. The possibility of Brexit is a cause for anxiety. Dissolution of the empire is a cause for doubt. This tweet is really interesting because this was before the vote on Brexit. The DUP, or the Democratic Unionist Party in the north of Ireland, and the current situation is they are the kingmakers because they have 10 seats and are holding up Theresa May's government. So this tweet kind of reflects how incredulous the current situation could have been at the time, which is kind of interesting because this is actually what has happened and turned out. But at the time when it was first tweeted, this situation or scenario really couldn't have even been imagined. So then, similarly enough again, the first use of Bratamacht was again on Twitter, and it referred to, would Bratamacht not be better? Despite RTE BBC poll about time for Bratamacht, according to a lot of people in the 6 counties. And you see the little emoji here. So as we see again and again, when we look at the corpus results, the unique thing and the interesting thing about the word Brexit and Bratamacht and the context, I'm on about the company the word keeps, you will see references to the north, references to the border, and it is really reflective of what we're worried about from day one. Even perhaps not everyone else was worried about the north or didn't think that the border would cause as much trouble as it's causing now, or as many stumbling blocks, but really the data here reflects from day one, and you'll see the results again and again. The context in which Bratamacht and Brexit is used is really reflective of what we were talking about, what our journalists were writing about. I'll come to it in a minute. And then it's just interesting to keep an eye out for that, I suppose, as well. And then on Facebook, then, this was in November 2015. What is best as an Irish term for Brexit? Bratamacht, Brat-imacht, Brat-skur. So skur is to retire from your job, so to retire, Brat-skur, Brat-élu is to escape again. What's interesting about this as well is the first instance on Facebook, it wasn't about the concept Brexit, it was, what are we going to call it in Irish? So the question was, we need to have an Irish language term, which is, again, unique. I'm not 100% sure of the reasoning behind it, but it's interesting just to keep an eye out for that and the similar instances as we look at the corpus results in a few minutes. So after that, this is kind of getting to the formation and the development. Around the end of 2016, the start of 2017, both terms, Brexit and Bratamacht, were added to our dictionary here, folklore.ie, and also to the National Database for Terminology. So these are two of the biggest online, freely available resources for anyone involved with Irish language, speaking, writing, anything at all. It's interesting here that Brexit is given precedence, where there's just next to Bratamacht, it's recognised, it's in use, so it's added in here. Where in the dictionary then, Bratamacht is given precedence, Brexit is foreign, and then the hard soft Brexit and the Brexit referendum is Bratamacht. There's no reference to the English language term. And actually I've been reliably told that because the uptake and use of Bratamacht has been so huge that this is actually going to switch around. So it's going to go from second place up to first, because it is the term most people in written text, print media are using at present. So really, I don't think there's ever been a word or a concept similar to this. It's hard to kind of even imagine another influence where there's been such a global or political impact of a concept, and then how we deal with it in language, and there's so much data available that it's interesting to study. So Kevin Scannell, again, was great. He sent me on this graph. So he looked at the words Bratamacht, Sassenach, Brelu, and he said he looked at the timeline when these were being used online. And as you can see, around the time of the referendum in 2016, here there was Bratamacht and Sassenach, really a huge spike. And Brelu kind of fizzled out. And then really towards the end of 16 onwards, Bratamacht took over. And a lot of the time in the literature it said if a term is used on an online portal, or if it's used in media or current affairs programme, it normalises its use and it really helps the uptake of a new word in a language. So adding back here the terms to these two dictionaries, it being used because it was used every single day in current affairs, it really helped with its adoption, and really, as we can see here, it just got bigger and bigger and was in more use and more use as time went on. So I thought, because of all this, wouldn't it be really interesting to see what's going on using this corpus? This is what I was developing, this corpus as part of my postdoc in DCU, and I said, wouldn't it be interesting now to see what happens with Brexit, what happens with Bratamocht, what happens with Brailu? And it was an interesting kind of question. I knew there was talk and discussions about the different words, but then the project just grew and grew and grew, and there's still more research to be done, which I haven't done. So we'll look at some of the results now, and these are the kind of more interesting parts, I suppose, for everyone here. So when I searched the terms, I didn't use the entire corpus, I just got a corpus of print media texts. So these are all the newspapers, magazines which report the news in the Irish language, and it was about 8 million words. And then when I searched for the various terms, this was for the first 2 years. You can see Bratamocht here is way more frequent than Brexit, Sassamach, Brailu. We have Brimocht here, which I think is a kind of a translation of Brexit, B-R-I-X-I-T. So when Brexit was first used in English, there was Brexit as well, but that just disappeared after a while and Brexit took over. So then looking at the results, and again going back to the context, it was interesting to see when new words enter language and when speakers use them, oftentimes they're marked because speakers are aware of their newness, because they're odd, they're not words we used every day, they're different, and what they do sometimes, they insert inverted commas, or they add a phrase, what has been called, or as termed as, and sometimes they just add a complete gloss or an extra phrase to explain it. And this is generally, Bauer undertook this research in 1983 on all languages, but the Irish language is no exception. It's shown, all the results when I searched the corpus showed the same. So Brailu, as you can see here with the Brailu or Brexit referendum approaching us in June, the debate is in full swing, but what impact will it have on us in 6 counties? Again, it's marked Brailu. ESRI research reflects that businesses in Northern Ireland and in the border counties would be worst affected if Brailu takes place, that is, if Britain leaves the European Union. So the word is kind of, it's used, but it's explained because it's very obvious that people are aware of its newness and are probably afraid that people might not understand the word. And as you see the context, the border counties, how it's going to affect us, will it have on the 6 counties, the effect. So again and again, it's the common theme from, and this was early days, this was before the vote even happened. And I don't think these discussions were being taken or were going on in England or in Britain at the time. And now it's the current hot topic that's up for discussion in Brussels and in Westminster every second day. So Sassamach as well is the same. Shortly after the vote for Sassamach, he gave his opinion to the Belfast Telegraph, stating that the people in the north were now weighing up which future they would prefer, to remain in the United Kingdom but outside the European Union, or as members of United Ireland, which would be part of the European Union. And even this question of United Ireland has come up in the last 6 months, year as well. Even I think Theresa May referred to it maybe last month to try get her deal over the line in Westminster, to try frighten her MPs into voting for it, saying this could, if this deal doesn't pass, this could facilitate United Ireland. Now it didn't help her, but it is, the topic has come up again more often in the last couple of months because of Brexit as well. Bratamocht then, while referring to Bratamocht and then Brexit in inverted commas, the English version, our beloved Taoiseach informed us that the border fence would be re-established immediately if the United Kingdom left the European Union. If Britain is hanging in the balance regarding staying or leaving, not many people in Ireland will be in doubt that we should adherently stick to our membership. This is membership of the European Union, despite the road Britain will take or whatever problems Brexit will create for us. And then Brexit, this was back in 2016 when Boris Johnson was Mayor of London. He was giving a hint to the Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, who was for Brexit, that is Britain leaving the European Union. And then another one, this is referring to the North again, and Sinn Féin would be the Republican Party in the North. Even though Sinn Féin have been on the same Eurosceptic side as the Unionists, they have turned in favour and are warning about the dangers that exist for Ireland, both North and South, if Brexit as it is termed, is explained. So the kind of extra thing that's added in to explain, to normalise it for the listener, was seen a lot in a lot of the results when I searched them. So then another thing that there was huge discrepancy in the Irish language. Every noun is masculine or feminine, and usually a masculine noun has no lenition, but a feminine noun will have a lenition, which is a H. So this is on van, this is on far. With Bratamocht, nobody knew was it masculine or feminine. We have masculine references, we have feminine references, and there was no rhyme nor reason to it. There was no huge strong influence. There were, not strong influence, but there weren't huge amounts of masculine nouns or huge amounts of feminine nouns. It was really nearly a 50-50 mix at the beginning. Now it's kind of settled down and it is a masculine noun. And it's because people have used it more, people have read it more often, so it's entered the language and people are more familiar with it and are adjusting to the grammar. I suppose the grammar is settling down. But then this isn't unique to Irish language. About a month or two ago I spotted this article in The Guardian. Europe's first ruling on Brexit, it's masculine unless you're Italian. So in all other European languages, it actually is a masculine noun, which is in line, Irish language is in line with that. Before this came out, the Irish language had decided, or had grammatically was masculine, but in Italian it actually is feminine. So even though Irish language is a minority language, and you might sometimes think, oh, but that's kind of exceptional, it's only a small amount of speakers and it's only out there. A lot of the results from the search reflected things that happen in other languages, major languages, international languages all over the world, which is great to see because it does reflect that the language is vibrant, the language can deal with these new concepts and it isn't out there on a limb doing its own little thing where the rest of the world moves on. Another thing was, I suppose, this Zabletta and et al., a group of researchers did case studies on journalists in minority languages. So I think they surveyed Welsh, Scots Gaelic speakers, Breton. I think they looked at Galicia also, and the difficulties that face minority languages when it comes to journalistic language, when it comes to reporting the news. So I suppose usually when new terms come into existence, you can go to the terminology committee and they discuss it and they meet and they decide on the official term, but that takes time. But if you're a journalist and news is breaking and you're on the radio or television tonight, or you need an article tomorrow morning, you don't have that time to decide what are we going to use. So that's kind of the reason why there was Sassamach, Brelu, Bratamach, Brexit at the start. So research had been done, what do journalists do? And the kind of strategies they came up with for minority language was sometimes they looked them up in dictionaries, but the term doesn't exist, so it's not going to be in the dictionary. Number two, writing periphrastic sentences that avoid or circumvent the need for a specific term. So because of the newness, because of unfamiliarity with it, we won't mention it. We'll just say, we won't mention Brexit, we'll just say, when Britain leaves the European Union. We'll use the phrase. And we've heard this again and again. So some of the examples in the corpus now reflected this. Sometimes there are newsroom discussions and they describe or they agree internally what term we're going to use. And the other ones really weren't that relevant. But number two here was the phrase, when Britain leaves the European Union, Britain leaving the European Union. And the corpus results The Taoiseach Enda Kenny met with the British Prime Minister David Cameron. This was early days now because both Taoiseach and the Prime Minister have changed since 2016. Britain leaving the European Union was one of the topics under discussion. So you see Brexit with kind of the additional, I'm going to explain it just to make sure everyone understands what's going on. That the government in the south would confirm before Britain leaves the European Union, rather than before Brexit, that the status of the Irish language as an official language of the European Union will not be reduced, and the recognition of the Irish language as the primary language of Ireland at home and abroad will continue. And this again is important, and a couple of a good few corpus results showed this, and it's kind of going back to that Facebook post, what are we going to call Brexit in the Irish language? The impact it will have on the language itself, the language in the north, the rights of language speakers as well. So even though there is, as I said at the beginning, a huge financial, political impact, there is a huge lexical impact or linguistic impact as well. And for us, it's nobody knows what is really going to happen on the political, economic or linguistic aspect. But the corpus results do show that this was on our minds, and this was up there with the border, the 6 counties, the north, what's going to happen. So since then, it's kind of only at the beginning, I haven't been able to look at the corpus for the more relevant or the more recent terms, but even though there was Brexit, then other words around Brexit have been used as well. So at the time, initially, the initial introduction, there were only references to a hard Brexit. There was no mention of a soft Brexit. Nobody was very hopeful, I think, at the time that there was going to be a soft Brexit. I couldn't find any references to a soft Brexit. It was only hard Brexit. That's what people were more interested in or more worried about at the time. It had been developed then, Frankemacht, like Brat Imacht, the Brexit. There were talks on discussions in 2017 that there could be a Brexit. Another one, Brexiteers, so the term had been expanded again. This was in, again, 2017. The primary reason she will not be able to satisfy the Brexiteers in her own party. That's still going on. She's still trying to satisfy them, and we'll see if Theresa May will be able to satisfy the Brexiteers in the future. So then just really the one, I suppose, I've been looking at and listening out for, and the one with the term which at the minute is causing a lot of trouble, is the no deal, the cliff edge, the no deal Brexit, which we're the last couple of months, it's been non-stop really in Ireland. We've been hearing about a Brexit gone Varga, or Bratamocht gone Varga, that is without a deal. A Brexit gone Aon Varga, which is a Brexit without any deal. There is a Brexit gone Mariga Vedianta, a Brexit without the deal being done, another form of it, and then a Brexit gone Sucru, so a Brexit without arrangement. So on current affairs, there's certain journalists using this term, and I'm not sure why they've picked it, rather than the Brexit gone Mariga. There must be a reason behind it. I wasn't contacting them, and I don't actually know why, but you would hear a lot of references to the Brexit gone Sucru, which was Brexit without an arrangement. If you look at the European Union database for terminology, so all the European Union languages agree on the terms, and Brexit gone Varga is the official term, which refers to, as you see in English, the cliff edge, the no deal Brexit, which is defined as a scenario in which the United Kingdom leaves the EU, the single market and the customs union without having concluded a future trade deal or put in place transitional arrangements. In French, they're using Brexit sans accord, they use no deal. In German, they use no deal scenario, no deal Brexit. They use the English term, Sturz in den Abgrund, variant forms, but we have a good old mix here of different ways of referring to no deal Brexit. The backstop is really just a direct translation, cool stad or cool stop, cool meaning back, stop is a stad or a stop, a hard or soft border, Tuaran Crua or Vog, a frictionless border, Tuaran Raig, which is a smooth border. This was a programme created by the government to be Brexit ready for businesses, be Raig and Vratamocht. So the interesting thing as well about the word Brexit, what has stemmed from it, all the extra variant forms, which is interesting. And also, I suppose going back to the examples, the contexts in the Irish language in which Brexit is used. It is really reflected from day one, coming up to the referendum in 2016, and then following the referendum. What we in Ireland were reporting about, what we were worried about, was the border of the north, how, because of the direct land border, how it will affect us in a practical manner. And I don't think everybody else was as worried about it until maybe 6 months, a year ago, and now it's creating such trouble. But really the corpus results are interesting. It's linguistic analysis, you're analysing the language, but then outside of that, it kind of gives you an insight into the socio-linguistic or the mindset of what's going in the country, or going on in the country. And that's the great thing about corpora, like even the corpus of contemporary American English. You could see the differences between what words are used, the context they're used in, and you have a huge amount of data, so it's completely objective. There's no kind of, oh, I'm going to write out this and twist it for my own meaning. You just get the results, and that's what it shows you. So I suppose what I found interesting as well about the words and the terms is online, a lot of these words come from online use, but also online there's been really interesting and entertaining wordplay and humour out of Brexit and out of people's understanding of it. And some of them, I just said I'd put them up here. Twitter is a great one. An Irish exit is when you leave without saying goodbye. British exit is when you loudly announce that you're leaving and then wander in and out of the door while you decide if you really want to leave or not, angrily complaining the whole time. Now, there were so many. Another one more recent, this was on Brexit Day, so this was supposedly the 29th of March when Britain were supposed to leave the European Union. This is a WhatsApp group, it's a group messenger service we'd use in Ireland, and this was created by Joe.ie. Britain has not left the group on 29th of May when they were supposed to. France, here. The Germans, lads, will you make up your mind? The Irish, trust us, they usually take ages to leave. The Italians, just laughing, and then Britain, very cross at the end. So we can laugh at it as well because it is a ridiculous situation. It is now the gift that keeps on giving. It's not a gift, but it is linguistically a gift, I suppose. The more you analyse it and the more you can stand back and look at everything else that's involved with it. And I think my favourite, in a shop in Cork on, oh no, this one now in a minute. This is the Irish Times. Just I think last week or the week before, Theresa May, why they might need a very long extension, and Jeremy Corbyn, her red lines and his red plans, that this extension, I think they're voting on, they might get a year now if the European Union agrees to it, and what they're calling it, I think what Tusk was calling it was a flex extension, so I'm not sure what the Irish language is dealing with that, but that's what I think the current thing. Now we're 7 hours behind, but I think in the summit, the emergency summit is on at the minute, and that's what they're agreeing on, will it be the year? So yeah, it might be a lot longer than we thought. And then, going back to probably my favourite, there are some entrepreneurs in Ireland, because I was home in Cork and I think it was the week before Valentine's Day, I spotted this card on sale. So even Brexit, I'm not sure did anyone buy it or use it, has been used to sell Valentine's cards in Ireland. So it shows how you can use language for various ways, but also that we can laugh at it as well and use language to create humour, which is a great reflection, I suppose, of the universality of Brexit as a term, that it's gotten to the stage now that it can be used as a source for humour and wordplay without explaining to everyone what's going on. So, in summary, there's been a widespread adoption of Brachtamach, an Irish language, this new term, in print media. Now, as I said earlier, it's a unique case because of the political, the economic situation, and it was hugely influenced by the media, by social media, by current affairs. Now, for the research, I'll be back in 10 years' time and I'll still be talking about it. It's taken me 10 years to get back to Montana, so give me another 10 now and I'll still be on about it. The question, is it fully conventionalised? Like, is it a term or is it just a vogue word? Is it passing through in whenever or whatever form Brexit takes in 30, 40 years' time? Will people be looking back going, oh yeah, that happened, what was that again? For us at the minute, we can't disassociate from it because it is everywhere. And the only thing I could really think of, which might be similar, I mentioned the Millennium Bug and Y2K to my students, my first years who were about 17, 18, recently, and one or two of them kind of looked at me and went, what? And I kind of stood back and went, you don't know what that is? And that's the only kind of worldwide word or concept that could really be comparable to Brexit. Now I think Brexit was actually even more influential, but that was the only thing, and when their reaction was, what are you on about? That I'm not sure if whatever form Brexit does take, that there will be a generation in 20, 30 years' time who will be like, oh, that was in the history books. Do you remember it? England left or Britain left the European Union. Another thing, I suppose, for further research, the sociolinguistic factors, and I kind of mentioned this, the results, what you get from the corpus is completely objective, but really the results do show where our mindset is and what we were worried about, what we were writing about, discussing, and is it reflective of our relationship with the United Kingdom? It must be. I haven't done research with our long history, shared history, but definitely from an Irish language perspective, I suppose I could say that there's a strong reluctance to use any Irish language word which might be similar to the English language. There would be a kind of tradition since the foundation of the state to Gaelicize or domesticize any new words to make sure they were Gaelic rather than similar to English or to the English language. Now, more research would have to be done on that, but definitely I think that is it's interesting to see. It would be interesting to analyse that in the future. And then I was only looking at the print media. If there was a big corpus of spoken, so if somebody could transcribe all the radio interviews, all the news interviews, it would be interesting to see were there comparisons between it, but unless millions are going to come in, I don't think anybody will be doing that anytime soon. So, thank you all very much. I know it's not specifically Butte or Montana related, but it is Irish language related, and I think currently it is the kind of topic that everyone is talking about and everyone is trying to understand and make sense of. And any questions or comments? Thank you all for coming. Delighted to have an excuse to come to Butte. So yeah, thank you very much.